The Mother of All Boredom, an excerpt from Monkey in a Pink Canoe. I had been staring at the dime for over 20 minutes. After 3 dozen attempts, I was struggling to transport it across the countertop through a mishmash of telekinesis and sheer willpower. I was bored. I have no idea why Elephant Butte Savings hired me in the first place. Besides having a pulse, I had virtually no marketable skills in the banking and finance industry. But since half the staff was out with St. Vitus dance, they were happy to have me. It took me less than 3 days to discover the true meaning of tedium. Beside myself, there were 6 other bank tellers who sat staring into space from 8 to 5. Unlike our counterparts in the 1950s who actually worked for a living, we sat there nearly comatose, put out to pasture through a lethal combination of online banking, electronic deposits, and ATMs. Throughout the morning, I fidgeted on my high-rise stool, searching for creative ways to make the time go by. If it weren't for all the robberies, it might have been a boring job. We were forbidden to read or surf the internet between customers, so I had to come up with original ways to entertain myself while appearing to be busy. I started by imagining that everyone who came into the lobby was nude. Then I tried to see how long I could hold my breath before customers started complaining about the colors I was turning. After comparing the number of hairs on my forearms, I'd push my index finger up my nose to see if I could touch my brain. In past jobs, I could always look like I was embroiled in some high-level marketing analysis as long as I had access to a computer. Add a telephone precariously balanced on my shoulder, and I could convince anyone that I was up to my eyeballs in deadlines and final project approvals. Later I discovered I could fill hours just by walking down the hall glaring at a clipboard. People automatically assumed that I was swamped with work and barely had time to get to the restroom, let alone take the time to say hello. A friend of mine told me when he wanted to look busy, he'd walk around with a bucket of paint and a paintbrush. After all, who would carry around a gallon of paint if they weren't in the middle of doing something important? Once I graduated from college, I got my first management job. I thought my days of boredom would be over. Supervising 100 employees should be easy enough to keep anyone busy, especially if they were as worthless as I was. What I managed to achieve was a higher level of boredom. That's why someone invented the executive toys. Things like the talking 8-ball, panic button, or tabletop Zen garden kit. I also had half a dozen miniature sport cars and sailboat replicas that I'd race around every afternoon. After I was accused of taking my 10th restroom break of the morning, I happened upon a proven technique while watching reruns of NYPD Blue. In the popular crime drama, Dennis Franz is always pissed off and jumps down everyone's throat. The technique works so well it's been adopted by virtually every cop, medical, and CSI show on television. Beginning the next day, I started coming to work ticked off. Finally, I found that I could combine all the techniques for maximum effect. On any given day, I could instantly morph from my jovial self to a pissed off bank teller who was constantly yelling at someone on my cell phone while glaring at a stack of papers on my clipboard. After several weeks, the bank manager called me into his office to discuss my struggling performance. I knew I was in trouble, but considering all the pencils he'd flipped into the ceiling tiles above his desk, I wasn't too worried about being called on the way that I managed my time. "Mr. Smith, we've had a number of complaints about your performance. The other tellers have complained that you appear to be under tremendous stress, yelling at the customers, excoriating people on the telephone, and pacing the halls with a clipboard and a bucket of paint. For God's sakes, man, you're just an entry-level teller. Maybe we expected too much from you." He was right. I couldn't deal with the stress of having nothing to do. So, we both agreed that the best place for me would be validating parking tickets in the basement parking garage. While I'd still be bored, at least I could still imagine that people were nude. Maybe I could get my finger further up into my brain.